Dr. Hayes, and this video is about children's books that are LGBTQ plus in theme, whether there are LGBT characters or um, the children characters or the families are LGBT families, and so there's a bunch of different varieties of children's books in this group. And so I have lots of fun, beautiful books to show you and to talk about. And we're going to talk about some of the categories that go along with these books and a little bit of the history and the production and publication of them, and some of the implications of themes in these books and the kinds of characters depicted, the kinds of diversity depicted, and sort of what that means for the children's literature industry. So before I show you any of my books, I thought I would give a little bit of background. So throughout this course, we've talked about cultural pluralism and how that basically means that you do not reduce down the experience of a culture to a single experience, a single one note kind of association, that there are multiple cultures that exist. Those cultures within themselves have various diversity and membership and a vast, rich history. And so with this new unit that we're going over, these sort of social minorities, this first week, the LGBTQ plus communities are ones that we're going to be talking about, where there are as many ways to be LGBTQ plus as there are to be a person, pretty much. So there's not one way to sort of fit into that culture. So I have picture books that are geared toward younger readers. I have a few like YA books that are geared toward teenagers and older readers, and so I'll get into those in just a second. But you had a scan to read for the Diversity and Youth Literature textbook for our class this week, and it gave you some statistics and backgrounds about there's a term that the author of the DYL in that chapter calls rainbow families, and that is a family where the parents in some way belong to the some LGBTQ plus community, or the children are LGBT in some way. And so these rainbow families, there are I think, if I'm remembering the statistics correctly, and the chapter was written quite a bit. It's a little bit old, so some of the statistics aren't quite right. But there are approximately 2 million-ish, probably a little bit more than that by now, give or take, below 2 million children who have been adopted by into a rainbow family, and that does not even include single parent homes that have a rainbow element, either the parent or the child. And there's really no way to track LGBTQ plus children. Like, we're in the early stages of even monitoring that and keeping records of it. It's just not, there really aren't a lot of statistics about that yet that are what would be considered conclusive. It's very early, and the debate is still brand new about whether LGBT children are even recognized, or if that's something pre-puberty that can be accounted for. Many LGBT children they never tell anybody. Their families keep it a secret. It's not documented anyway. But there has been more and more literature come out that depicts LGBT children. I have a few books that we'll look at and show that. But the fact is that I think about it varies from year to year, and as the sort of demographics shift and the census shifts, but it's roughly like 44 to 5% of adopted children in the United States go toward a rainbow family of some kind. That actually increased quite a bit after June of 2015 when gay marriage was recognized as legal in the United States. And so after a lot of long-term couples were sort of their partnership was legally legitimized, on paper, then it became a lot, like options for adoption became a lot more open to them on like in a bureaucratic way, like red tape and legally. And so that those numbers have shot up. It's probably even more than that now. The census and some of the statistics are a little bit older. We just did a census this year in 2020 when this video is recorded, and so when those results are posted, I'm sure that we will see. I just feel like we will see an increase in the statistics from the last time that was measured, just because of the legalization of gay marriage. But anyway, it's not a small amount of children. It's millions of children, and hundreds of thousands of families are categorized as rainbow families and are affected by um, the representation of themselves in literature. And so just like any other group of children that we've been talking about this whole semester who need and deserve to see themselves and their families and their life experience represented on the page, children in rainbow families deserve that as well and need that. But there just isn't a whole lot. I think on average, last I read, the average publishing statistics for LGBT themes in children's books, there's about 4 or 5 books a year on average that come out that feature LGBT themes for children in some way. Um, and that comes and goes, and not all of those are good, high quality, what we would consider to be a well-made multicultural book, right? Something that is, some of them have low quality illustrations or have uh, they're not as well written. A lot of them are self-published. It's when we're talking about high quality, artistically pleasing, um, sensitively written, uplifting content for children, literature, something that would be you would classify as literature and say this is poetic, this is beautiful, this is literary. There's just not a whole lot, and most of what we have has come out within the last, I would say maybe 2 to 3 decades at the most, but I would say two. The last, turn of the century, 20 years, maybe 30. I have a couple things that are from the 1980s, and those were like groundbreaking pioneer type texts, right? Most of the things are published in the mid 2000s and early teen or 2000 teens and leading up to the recognition of gay marriage in 2015. There was a huge activist push toward marriage equality and a visibility for the LGBTQ plus communities and and things. So a lot that brought with it a lot of publishing of books of all kinds with those kinds of themes. So my point is, a lot of the literature is pretty recent. We talked about Jewish children's literature didn't even start until the 1930s. Well, LGBT children's literature didn't start until probably the mid to late 1980s and 1990s at the earliest, and that was just a couple things. So we're talking about a very new, young genre of literature. So I wanted to, I'll just stop talking, just blah blah blah. But um, I wanted to maybe just get into a few of these and show you. So I'm going to show you the books I have for children first, like younger readers first. And the ones these are the ones I have. By no means are these the only ones that exist. This is a sampling of the kind of literature that has been produced for young children, young readers, um, with LGBTQ plus themes and characters. And so what I have found, and what I think is probably generally true based on what I found, they exist in 3 categories. There are books about pride in general, the pride, capital P, pride, the movement that happens in June, Pride Month, and the rainbow flag and things like that. Then there are books about rainbow families, meaning there are um, two moms or two dads or something like that. There's a family parent dynamics basically, that helps children sort of reconcile the otherness they might feel by having a non-normative family unit according to their peers, right? And so there are books that depict um, rainbow families with alternate sort of parent dynamics. Then the third group is um, picture books and books for young children who that feature an LGBTQ plus child, a transgender child, or a gender nonconforming child, things like that, and it helps the reader sort of come to terms with having a child who is experiencing the sort of a gender identity uh, journey. And so the question always comes up when we talk about these multicultural texts is it a mirror or a window, right? Who is the intended audience? Is it meant for an LGBT child or a child of a rainbow family to see themselves reflected? Is it a mirror text? Or is it intended as a window text where a majority child or a sort of nuclear family unit child with a mom and a dad, a heterosexual uh, parents, is intended for those children to sort of get a glimpse into the life of a rainbow family or someone like that. So as I'm showing you these, you can kind of be thinking, and you can say, that might be more of a mirror, that might be more of a window. You can kind of make that judgment as we go. But I was going to show you I almost threw them all on the floor. I was going to show you the books about pride first. So I have a few. Um, Coincidentally, or I guess fortunately, because the rainbow is the symbol for the LGBTQ plus communities and for the pride, these books are gorgeous because a lot of them have very colorful illustrations. And something I've noticed about a lot of pride books is that they are illustrated per color, like each page represents a certain color. And so you'll see what I mean. I have this one called Rainbow, a first book of pride. And it is just sort of an introductory uh, book about, it's like a colors book, but it's a colors book in the context of the rainbow flag for pride. Colors books are not anything new, right? There are tons of colors books. This is one. See, it's all about red, and there is a gay couple who has a child here. Um, Orange apparently is the color of healing. I didn't know that, but that's kind of cool. And so you have all of these sort of rainbow families of different diversity who are represented for each color. So it's a standard colors book, but it is depicting same-sex couples who have families. And then you have, so you kind of get the gist of this one. So it's your standard colors book, but it is in the context of pride and the rainbow flag, which is a really pretty book. This one is similar, but it's about the pride movement specifically this day in June. And it has a whole cast of colorful characters and costumes and everything. But it takes place during a pride parade. And each color or each page represents a different color and a different sort of culture within the communities. So this is black. It's got the biker, like some leather looking motorcycle riders. You have I don't know. This might be orange because everybody's wearing orange, like the orange pants. But you can kind of see the signs that there's. This one is parents. Like we love our lesbian daughters. We love our gay sons. I love my gay sons. She has. So this page focuses on parents. Oh, here's the leather one. Here's the black. You can see the characters. This book is just so fun. This is nuns that are dressed up. This is a real order of nuns. I'll tell you about that in a minute. This is a real order of nuns that exist in San Francisco. This focus of this page is like pink, I think, pink and red. And this one might be white, might be the color that's going, but it's a bunch of sailors. Like this sailor's like holding this one. He's got a flower in his mouth. This one's red. I think the other one's pink. This one's red, and it focuses on the AIDS awareness ribbon for red. I just wanted to show you each one of these, and there's a reason for that. This one seems to be blue. They've got the blue equality, blue and yellow equality symbol, and a blue car back there. I'm not sure what color. This is just all the colors. But you can kind of see there's kind of a dominant theme on each one. This one is marriage. Marriage is the theme with like brides and grooms. This one has flags. It's just really pretty. And then here you have sort of all of them together, all of the different characters. But what I want to show you is this book has reading guide. So it has a paragraph for every single page. Every single page, it has a guide for what's being depicted on that page. So it has the this day in June, let's see, motors roaring, spirits soaring. So it in the bold is the text that's on each page, and then it has a paragraph about it. So like motors roaring, spirits soaring, that's about the motorcycle one. Then you have clad in leather, perfect weather, and it has sort of the background of like how leather has been associated with the LGBT communities. Artists painting, sisters sainting. So this is the one about the nuns. So it talks about how the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence is an order of LGBT nuns that formed in San Francisco in 1979. The sisters wear exaggerated and campy nuns' habits and makeup. The sisters engage in outreach to various LGBT groups, promoting human rights and a respect for diversity. Over the years, the sisters have sainted hundreds of people who have contributed to the acceptance of LGBT people, including former San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom, comedian Margaret Cho, and the first married lesbian couple in California, Phyllis Lyon and Del Martin. So like it gives like a little history lesson about every single page, which is so interesting to me. It's I can't recommend this book enough. This Day in June, if you're interested in a book like that. Then another nonfiction historical picture book I have is called Pride: The Story of Harvey Milk and the Rainbow Flag. So this is a true story of the California politician Harvey Milk, who was the first openly gay person to be elected to public office. And here's a picture of him. And this has a similar thing where each page kind of has a color that is dominant. I noticed like there's yellow. This one's more blue. This one's green. So you kind of have a color that's dominant. But it's all about the invention of the rainbow flag and how he and his partner, or like, it's just an artist, it's not his life partner, Gilbert Baker, and he commissioned this Gilbert Baker to create a flag, and it talks. This is a great page. It shows the different kinds of people who carry the rainbow flag and who sort of flash the rainbow symbol. And so you have an elderly person, you have a disabled, someone in a wheelchair, you have various professions, walks of life, ages, genders, gender representations. One of the things that the chapter in DYO you mentioned, Red mentioned, was that there's very, very little cultural representation, literary representation of elderly LGBT people, right? It's usually when you see depictions of LGBT people, it's young, healthy, new parents or people falling in love. Like it's usually young, virile, healthy people, and so you don't have a whole lot of representation of elderly LGBT people. But then it keeps going, and it talks because Harvey Milk and the mayor of San Francisco were assassinated. It was a huge big thing. 5 months after they debuted the rainbow flag at the very first Pride in June of 1979, I think 78 maybe, uh, and um, 78. June of 1978 was the very first Pride March, and they debuted the Pride flag. 5 months later, Harvey Milk was assassinated, and there was a candle vigil for him, and it wound through the streets of San Francisco. And then it talks about how after that, in 1994, and to honor Harvey Milk, the same Gilbert who made the original flag made a mile-long one, and they paraded it through the streets to celebrate him. And this was in New York, is where that happened. Then it talks about how the spread of the popularity of the rainbow flag. But I wanted to point out one thing in the back here. This has sort of more educational content. It has a timeline of Harvey Milk's life and some significant things he did. It has a timeline of the rainbow flag and like some significant events in the sort of progress and popularity of the rainbow flag. And then it has some real life pictures of Harvey Milk, the flag, some of their marches, the White House when it was all lit up, the Harvey Milk Road there that it was named after him. Street, Harvey Milk Street is what it's called. So this is like this is a historical nonfiction picture book all about the founding of Pride and the creation of the rainbow flag as its symbol. So those are my Pride books. I do have some. I'll just kind of go through and show you. Let's see. There are several. So one of the very first ones, this is a new updated version, but Heather Has Two Mommies. This originally came out in 1989. It's one of the earliest ones. And people sometimes quote it, make fun of it, like, "Oh, this is a Heather Has Two Mommies" kind of a thing. In pop culture, you hear people kind of make jokes about. Well, as you see, little Johnny, Heather has two mommies, right? So this is probably the original one. Now the illustrations have been like the copyright of these particular illustrations is 2015. So I think that it's been updated a little bit, but you can kind of see it's really pretty. It's the Heather's moms take her to school, so it's all about her starting school, and they are in. It's mostly a first day of school book and sort of the nervousness that happens with the first day of school, and her moms take her to school. And it's all about the stuff she does. But then they get to Story Circle, and someone asks what her dad does for a living because they're all saying what their dads do and their parents do. And she's like, I don't have a dad, right? So the teacher has the idea that they all draw pictures of their families. And so some of the children's families have just a grandma and their two cats and her. One of the kids has a stepmom. It's a mom and stepdad dropping him off at his real dad's house, right? So I mean, there's all these different things, and so then it just shows that all kinds of families are valid, and that the main thing that she said, it says each family is special. The most important thing about a family is that all the people in it love each other, right? And so it's sort of this message. This might be, see, the last one is they go home together. So this might be even sort of a gentle way. I think the intention when this first came out was that it was sort of a gentle window to sort of guide young children who might have a child from a rainbow family in their class. And this was sort of a sensitive, gentle way to interact with it. Along the same lines, let me show you this one. This is first. We have the family book. This is not really necessarily an LGBTQ plus book, but it talks about there's all different kinds of families. Some of the same color, some live near each other, some don't. Some, some eat the same thing, some don't. Some families have a stepmom or a stepdad, stepbrothers and stepsisters. Some families adopt their children. I like this one. It's a duck and then they've adopted whatever, a penguin, I think. And then there's just one page that says some families have two moms and some families have two dads. Right here. And then it's over here, some families have just one parent. So that's in the middle of this book. There's just kind of a nondescript thing just kind of dropped in there. I have several of these also, little board books. These are by okay, I have Mommy, Mama, and Me. And this is about a kid who has two moms, and one is called Mommy and one's called Mama. And that's how the kid distinguishes between the two. And he has special things that he does with each one of them. Mama and Mommy are distinct people in his world, but they're a family that loves each other. These two are by the same pair, Michael Justin and Isaac Zinzu. Zinzu? No, Zenu. Zenu. I want to show you, these are gorgeous books. This illustrator, Isaac Zenu, is a fashion illustrator. He's worked with I think his credits are like Chanel and all these different, and so he usually draws fashion sketches, fashion drawing. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen them, like the sketches of people like in different outfits. Well, he illustrated this, and it's every page has a different family on it with a different kid. So it's all about a day in the life of a kid with two dads, and the two dads are different, and the kid is different on every page. So there's really a good chance for diversity. I just wanted to point out this newspaper is adorable. It's the Daily Daily, and the headline here, "The World Upturned" is one of them. Dogs are smart. That's the headline. Dogs are smart. It's just cute. But everyone in this, one thing I'll say, every person in this book is impeccably dressed. But it's just all the different things they do throughout the day, going to the park, and I'll skip. This is a really pretty image. But yeah, so the similar one is two mommies, same person, same people, the author and the illustrator. But it's a really diverse group of families here, of people being represented. Sometimes it doesn't even show them, it's just from the kid's point of view. This one is cute. It's two lesbian couples and their kids, and it says, "Then it's off to a play date that my friends and I made for our moms. We keep an eye on them from the sandbox." I think that's so cute. Like the kids are in charge. So yeah, I like that picture too. That's cute. That one is really pretty also. Yeah, so this is just all kinds of things that they do. The last one I'll mention for this group is the one that you had to read for class, and Tango Makes Three. This is a real life story that happened. I think it's the Pittsburgh Zoo, if I'm not mistaken. No, sorry, Central Park Zoo. I was thinking it was in Philadelphia somewhere, but it's at the Central Park Zoo, and it's about two male penguins who were a couple, because penguins permanently mate. They have one mate. They mate for life, and they raise their baby, the one egg at a time, kind of a thing. And lots of people know about how penguins do. Well, in the zoo, there's these two male penguins who mated, and so we have images of the zoo and different families coming in. I think right here, this might be sort of a subtle. This might be a lesbian couple with their kids. It could just be two mom friends taking their kids to the zoo, but you could sort of read it as the other if you want. Especially if you are a rainbow family reading this book, you could totally see yourself in that. So it's talking about all different kinds of families, and in the Penguin House, it talks about these two real life, Roy and Silo, who were penguin boys who mated. And it's actually kind of very sad because this is heartbreaking. It's showing all of the other sort of penguin couples who are hatching their children, and then Roy and Silo don't have one. And so they try to mimic, this is true, this really happened. They try to mimic what the other ones do. And so they get a rock and they put it in their nest and sit on it, but nothing happens, right? And so the zookeeper sees what happens, and there was one couple that had two eggs, and they only care for a penguin couple only care for one egg at a time. And so if they have more than one, or if they somehow for a fluke lay more than one, or if a penguin dies after laying an egg, anyway, sometimes eggs get abandoned. Well, a zookeeper noticed this, and he put an egg in their nest for them, and they sat on it and hatched it, and it became their son, and they became a family. And so this book is so adorable how they finally get their son. So it's an adoption story, but it's also like a an LGBT story. In the ends they have they're a family together. Roy and Silo and their chick, their child Tango, is the baby. Tango makes three. Uh, so this is a really popular book. It was a really really popular story. It's really heartwarming, and it's a cute way to end that little section. But as you can see, this is just a sampling. But that's I would say traditionally and going back like the earliest examples of LGBT books for kids and the ones that are probably the most easy to find. Those aren't even all of them. That's just a sampling that I found that I thought were pretty and well done. Are the ones that have rainbow families where there's a same-sex couple as the parents, and those are the most prominent because that's probably the most needed window. I will go out on a limb and say that that's probably the most needed window because you will have um, heterosexual children and children of heterosexual parents who are very likely going to have friends or classmates from rainbow families who it would benefit everyone involved if those children from non-rainbow families, from heterosexual families, sort of understood the dynamic of a rainbow family and was sensitive and open to it. So those rainbow family books are probably the most easily come by, and there's some that are better than others. So that's just a sample. The last group of children's picture books I have are that they feature LGBT children. The way that this usually manifests, because children are not sexual, if a child is sexualized, that's a crime, right? Like that's a crime. So a child, you, it's really tricky to say a child, like an elementary school child, has a sexual identity, as in they prefer, like romantically prefer, or are attracted to someone, if a boy is attracted to a boy or a girl is attracted to a girl, that kind of a thing. Because children are not supposed to be sexualized yet. So you don't really have depictions of a, a gay third grader or something like that. But there are more and more and more, not hardly very many. That I have probably most of the ones that are recognized as the good ones here for you. But you're getting in recent years some examples of gender nonconforming or transgender children. So this is where you have a child who is recognizing that their assigned gender identity at birth is not how they feel inside, right? And not how they wish to present in the world. And so they're experimenting with different sorts forms of gender performance and presentation. That isn't this. It's not a sexual thing. It's not that they like someone who's their same gender, right? It's an identity thing. So I want to make that clear. And that's the difference when you have an LGBT child. It's their identity inside them. It's not who they're attracted to, right? So I have a few here. Let me see. These two are both about characters who identify as male. They call themselves boy. They don't think they're not a boy, but they like to dress up as in traditionally more feminine attire. So Jacob's New Dress is all about a boy named Jacob who goes to school and he prefers to wear dresses. So in dress up, he always wants to be the princess. And there's an antagonist. You have Christopher, who teases him about wanting to be a princess, who teases him about what he likes to wear. Jacob has a mother who is very sensitive to Jacob's tastes. She bought him a frilly dress to wear for Halloween, but she tells him that's not really a school dress, and he asks to wear a dress to school, and it says, "Mom was quiet. Let me think about that," she says. So you don't have, "Sure, honey, wear a dress." I think this mom's reaction is way more realistic when her little boy's asking to wear a dress to school And she's like, let me think about it, right? She's probably worried about his safety, worried about his mental health of being teased by his classmates. So she's like, I'm not really sure. Well, Jacob makes himself a dress out of a towel and a ribbon. And his parents are like, well, at least put some shorts and a t-shirt on underneath. Um, he's teased at school. A boy rips his towel off and is chasing him around, and he's devastated. Um, so this is very, very touching, this scene where he's telling his mom about it. And he says, Mom, whispered Jacob, can you help me make a real dress? Mom didn't answer. The longer she didn't answer, the less Jacob could breathe. So this is a very real moment where a child is being honest about his gender nonconformity to his parent, and he is desperately waiting for his parent to respond, to accept it. Um, Let's get the sewing machine, she said finally. Jacob felt the air refill his body. He grinned. Mom smiled back. There are all sorts of ways to be a boy, she said, right? So they worked together to make him a dress. So this is a parent who's not quite sure what to do with her son's, um, gender fluidity. This is a son who's desperate to have his mother's acceptance. It's so real, right? It's so real rather than my son's going to wear a dress and nothing you can say about it. This is a mom who's struggling. The father is the same way. He's showing his new dress to his dad. And it says, Dad studied the dress. Jacob started to get that can't breathe feeling again. I can see you worked hard on that dress, said Dad. Are you sure you want to wear it to school? Jacob nodded. Dad nodded back and smiled. Well, it's not what I would wear, but you look great, right? So you have this dad who's accepting of his son. So then you have lots of pictures of Jacob so proud of his new dress at school. Um, and so you get through the whole thing, and there's a little thing in the back from the authors, Sarah and Ian Hoffman are the authors, and they explain that they are a couple, and their son Sam had an experience very similar to Jacob. In preschool, he wanted to wear dresses. Um, he had long hair, wore dresses, loved the color pink. He also liked boy things like castles and dinosaurs and stuff like that, but he really liked pink and dresses and playing princess. And so because of their son, they started researching gender expression, especially in children, and they started working in advocacy groups for gender nonconformity in young children and sort of how to support them through that. And this book was a result of that, and I think it's really well done. I think that the depiction of the parents and their reaction and Jacob's hesitant sort of holding his breath, waiting for to hear how they're going to respond. I think it's so real and so well done. A similar book to that is Call Me Max. Max was assigned a girl as a girl at birth, um, and but feels like a boy on the inside. This book is intended to be way more educational. This is seems to be clearly a window text. Um, it has little chapters and everything, and it explains when I look in the mirror, I see a boy. I see a boy with spiky brown hair. I see a boy this and that. I also see a boy who is transgender, it says. And then you have this definition. Transgender is a long word, but it means something simple. So it breaks it down. What does trans mean? What does gender mean? And it defines the term for the reader. And then it says sometimes, usually when a baby is born, the parents say, it's a boy or it's a girl. But if the baby could talk, sometimes it might say, no, I'm not. Right? And so it kind of explains this sort of interior identity that children experience. And so um, it kind of takes us through Max's journey of um, presenting as male, even though he was born, and his parents said it's a girl, right? So there's a couple other things I wanted to point out. There's an interaction with his teacher where the teacher has a name for Max's female birth assigned name on the roll. And the teacher looks and doesn't like, you don't look like your name would be this, right? And she says, The teacher, oh, Max says, I wondered if she thought my name didn't make sense for me. I felt that way too. And Max asks, can you call me Max? I asked. Max is the boy in my favorite book. She nodded and wrote it down. And then in parentheses, this is key, it says, I won't tell you what my old name was. That's private. So that is sort of a gentle reminder to a child reader, sort of a cisgender, gender normative child, that it's rude. It's kind of private and rude to ask a transgender person what their old name was. That's private, right? So this is kind of a gentle way of letting you know that that's not really done, right? Um, so then it goes through, there's a whole bathroom issue. Max doesn't know which bathroom to use at school because when he's out, he goes with his mom in her bathroom, and when he's with his dad, he goes with his dad in his bathroom, and at home there's just the one bathroom, but he holds his pee at school. And it talks about going into the girl bathroom, and the girls are scared of him, and the boys tease him in the boy bathroom. Um, then there's a tomboy girl at school who likes to climb trees and catch bugs, but she's still a girl, so that kind of confuses him. Um, he's like, but I feel like a boy on the inside, right? Then there is another gender nonconforming boy at his school who wears dresses, right? And he's like, Max says, I know I can't be a girl. I hate wearing dresses. And then Stephen looked down at his dress and glared at me and said, this is my favorite dress, and I like being a boy, right? So he's like, so that's not it. He's like, I just feel like one on the inside. And so the kids come over and play, and Max's parents hear his friends calling him Max, which is not his given name, not the name they call him. And so they talk to him about it, and he kind of tells them, I tell everybody at school I'm a boy, and I make them call me a boy name. So this is excellent. They take him to a support group, and it's a support group for other transgender children who don't feel like they embody the gender assigned at birth. Right? There's all different ways to be. Several different ways to be transgender. So then he says, my mom and dad talked to my teacher, and we found a group for kids like me, boys and girls, and kids who weren't boys or girls. All of us were transgender. We talked about serious things like bathrooms and teasing. We also talked about fun things like video games and books and toys. Then I love this. I don't know what our parents talked about, like in the adult version of the group. I don't know what our parents talked about. Probably the same things. Video games and books and toys. I just like that. So then you have this sort of last page, which I love, and it says, being a boy isn't better than being a girl, but being myself is the best, right? So it's just sort of recognizing and owning your identity is what this book's about. So this one and Jacob's New Dress are very similar about a child at school. Now, Jacob's New Dress, Jacob doesn't feel like he's supposed to be a girl. He's just likes to wear dresses sometimes. Max is a full-on transgendered child who was born female but is convinced he's a boy and feels like a boy and his identity is a boy. So that's a little bit different. We have other ones like that too. Julian is a Mermaid is a gorgeous book, a Stonewall Award winner, Stonewall Book Award winner. And this is similar where Julian is a boy, but he's on the subway with his abuela, his grandmother, and he sees these mermaids, these women in these mermaid costumes in their hair, and he's like, I want to be like that, right? So they get home, and it talks about how he fantasizes having long flowy hair and a long dress that's like a tail. So they get home, and his abuela's like, I'm gonna go take a bath. You be good. Well, while she's in the bath, this is the page I was trying to get to. While she's in the bath, he goes through this whole transformation. He takes off his clothes, and then he gets the ferns and the flowers and makes a headdress, and he puts makeup on, and it's like a whole thing. He's trying to mimic the mermaids he saw. Then he gets the curtain, and he makes like a whole dress, and he's like fabulous. He's feeling himself, right? He's like into it. Well, then his grandmother comes out, and he's afraid she's upset. She's like, I'll be right back. And it's so gorgeous because she comes out dressed and ready to go, and she gives him, she has something for him. She gives him a necklace, right, to finish his outfit. And then they leave together and they go find, she's like, I'm taking you somewhere special to find more people like you. And she takes him to a drag queen parade, right? And lets him join in, and they join in the drag queen parade. So it's really sweet. It's kind of cute, but it's the my favorite page is where his grandmother's like, "What are you doing? I'll be right back." And he's all like crestfallen, and he holds up his curtain, and he's like all upset. And then she comes back with a necklace to finish his outfit, and he's so excited. The last book I have to show you for the kids is this one, My Awesome Brother. This one's not as much of a high quality, but it is about the narrator of the story is a younger sibling who has an older sibling who is transgender, who's assigned girl but wants to be boy. Um, and so it starts out, I won't read the whole thing, but it starts out, my big sister Donna wasn't happy, so I tried to make her happy by doing silly stuff. I tried something different every day. So it's this little kid who tries to cheer up. I think, I don't know if the kid is a boy or girl, it doesn't really say. But they try to cheer up their older sibling, Donna, nothing they try works. It says, but on the end of the day, at the end of the week, says, then I found out why my big sister Donna had been sad. Donna wanted to be my big brother John. And then it just says, I like the name John. Now I have a big brother John. And John is heaps happier. You know how I can tell? And then it shows them doing fun activities that happy people do. And so the happiness evident in John's behavior is all that the protagonist kid needs, the younger sibling needs to understand. He says, I reckon my brother John is pretty awesome. Right? So it's just kind of it's very simple, very simple and straightforward. This is definitely aimed at very young readers who might have a trans or not gender nonconforming person in the family, and this is sort of a very simple and gentle way. Look, Donna was not happy, but as John, he's very happy. So he's going to be John, and we're happy for him, right? It's very straightforward. The subtitle is a book about transgender acceptance. So it's more like instead of about a person who or a child who thinks they might be transgender, this is geared more towards someone who has a transgender person in the family that they might need to um, be guided toward acceptance of. So that's all the picture books I have for you for children. I wanted to take a little bit of time, not a lot, because there's not as much to show with books for older readers, but I do have a stack of books for older readers that I wanted to mention. Um, a couple of these we've probably already talked about in class, so I won't go into too much detail. The one I want to mention first is Annie on My Mind. This is from the 80s, late 80s, 1989, I think, even at the very end. And it's about it's a high school romance between two girls. And they go to different schools. So there's a class element. It's in New York, I think. There's a class element. One goes to like a wealthy private school. One goes to sort of a lower income public city school, high school situation. And so there's an embarrassment of their different class element. As well as the fact that their relationship is taboo, especially at this time in the 80s. Their relationship was taboo. Um, and so, but it's really beautifully written, and I really enjoyed this book when I read it a few years ago. Annie on My Mind. I wanted to mention it first because it's one of the earlier examples we have. Um, there's just a couple other. We mentioned the families. This one I've talked about this in class, I think, but I love Jacqueline Woodson. Jacqueline Woodson herself is a lesbian woman, and she not all of her books have LGBT themes in them, but this one does, and it's about a boy, 14-year-old boy. Can you see the? Yeah, from the Notebooks of Melanin and Sun. Melanin's son is the character, and he's a 14-year-old whose mother has come out and later on in adulthood. So he's a teenage boy who is dealing with the reality of having a gay mom. So that's just kind of a different perspective as far as that goes. So look, it's so thin. It's easy to read, and it was a Coretta Scott King honor book, so it's good. And it's Jacqueline Woodson, my girl, so it's good. Um, this one we're reading for class, David Levithan, but it's in my stack, so I didn't mention it. Boy Meets Boy. We will talk more about this one in class. I can't say enough good things about David Levithan and his whole deal. I love his style. And it's kind of like a classic teen love story, but so not at the same time. It's so unique while also being, you know, so the same as like any kind of quirky teen love story, but there's so many colorful characters we'll talk about. Um, some other sort of YA, uh, sort of teen LGBT themes, I guess, books. Simon versus the Homo sapiens Agenda. This book was made into the movie Love, Simon that came out a couple years ago that was really popular. And it's about a closeted boy who starts up a secret pen pal ship with another boy. Um, and he's outed because of it to his school. He's outed to his school and friends because of his sort of secret. He has a secret sort of boyfriend. He doesn't even know who it is. They've never met, and so it's kind of heartbreaking, but like gorgeous at the same time. And the the kids in this book, like the teenagers in this book, his friends and the people who support him and the people his class in school, they're the kind of kids that I hope Echo grows up to be and to be friends with. If that makes any sense. I just love this. I love this. Um, we had a presentation in class about Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the universe. It's look at all the awards that it's won. Um, but it has two teenage boys at the center of the plot, and it's there's a romance there. There's a but it's so much more than that. There's the theme of the older brother who's incarcerated, and you have the Hispanic sort of double consciousness that they're dealing with of being Hispanic American, and there's poverty and class issues, and I mean all kinds of things beyond where I would not just call this is a gay teen romance. That's so reductive of what's going on in this book. But since we had a presentation about this in class, I thought I would mention it. I can't not mention my boy John Green. I love John Green. So he co-wrote a book with David Levithan, who wrote Boy Meets Boy. And this book is so creative. It's called Will Grayson, Will Grayson. And it is about two boys, high school boys named Will Grayson, who live in Chicago. And it's just a coincidence that they have the same name. They don't know each other. Their lives do not interact. They don't go to the same school or anything. But, and so the chapters intersect, like they alternate between one Will Grayson's point of view and the other Will Grayson's point of view. And John Green wrote one of the Will Graysons, and David Levithan wrote the other Will Grayson. And John Green's Will Grayson is a straight boy, but his best friend is named Tiny Cooper, and he's sort of this larger than life, 300 plus pound, fabulous character, right? Who is out and proud. And David Levithan's Will Grayson is a closeted gay boy at a different school who is sort of dealing with it really is sort of a traumatic experience for him of being closeted and being sort of tortured by it. And his sort of journey toward um, acceptance of that identity of himself. Well, of course, their paths end up intersecting, right? The two Will Graysons end up meeting. I'm not going to tell you how because it's like an awesome scene in the book if you're going to read it. The way they meet is just hilarious and great. And so their paths end up crossing. And there's this sort of interesting mistaken identity of they both have the same name. And so, yeah, there's a couple of different LGBT characters in here, and I just love how creatively it's done. So, and as a spinoff, okay, so one of the plot points in this book is Tiny Cooper, John Green's Straight Will's best friend, Tiny Cooper, has written a autobiographical musical of his life story, right? And it is the school is putting it on, and it's this fabulous production of Tiny Cooper's life story. And so David Levithan wrote the musical, like the screenplay, right? Like it's the screenplay that the school supposedly puts on. It's only mentioned in sort of snippets from backstage, like now they're doing the baseball scene, blah, 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 little league scene or whatever. And so little lyrics here and there are mentioned, and scenes are mentioned, and Tiny Cooper revises it over and over. Well, David Levithan actually wrote the screenplay "Hold Me Closer," the Tiny Cooper story. Right, that's the fictional musical from Will Grayson that the school puts on about Tiny Cooper, but now it exists in reality in this screenplay that David Levithan wrote, which is so cool to me. I just have a few more to show you. I have a couple. These are not all of them. Also, there are way more. I should mention there are way more books for teenagers, YA books that feature LGBT characters than there are for children. Like the ones I showed you for children, um, it's a lot more rare. So I got most of the good ones. Like I collect them. But there are many, 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 many YA books that have at least some sort of a LGBT presence. Like there's a friend or a couple at school, same sex couple at school, or one of the characters is in a rainbow family or something like that. It's way more normalized in YA literature, and there are more examples. Not nearly enough, I would say, but it's more common, and not as jarring, I think, for a teenage reader to encounter an LGBT character or theme in their texts. So the ones I showed you are just a few of my favorites, because there's no way I could be exhaustive or comprehensive in all the teen romance novels that exist, or YA books that exist that have LGBT themes. So I wanted to show you a couple of my favorites. I do have a couple also that are YA books that are feature specifically transgender characters and themes. One is male, female, or none of the above. And so it is, as you can see, it's about it's about a girl. She was born, she was born with both, um, let's see, let me just read the description. Uh, she was voted homecoming queen. And she has a boyfriend. Um, so a visit to the doctor throws everything she thought she knew about her perfect life into question. She discovers that she's intersex. Intersex is the word. I'm like, there's a word for intersex, which means that though she outwardly looks like a girl, she has male chromosomes, not to mention boy parts. So sometimes, an intersex person is born with um, both male and female genetic markers. There's a male chromosome. There might be even like male, as it put in quotation marks, parts like testicles or something, but they might be recessed up inside. Um, there are intersex people who present as male, but they have ovaries inside. There are intersex people who are born with parts and chromosomes from both genders, and so this is sort of all about her journey, sort of dealing with this um, sort of alternate identity that her body has given to her, and the decisions that come along with that. So none of the above. This one is called Luna, and it is about a trans girl, and but I think it's been a while. It's told from the perspective of her, um, her sibling. So Luna used to be the brother, um, and so it's all about a sibling who's going through, kind of like My Awesome Brother. It's about a sibling who's going through having his sibling transition into a sister. So that's what this one, and it's really well done. One more thing I'll mention, just as an example, there are probably the most vast category of LGBT themes in books for like young adult, like YA books, is where there's, like I mentioned a while ago, there might be a character who is gay, or um, a character who maybe less common. You might have a trans character who's just part of the scenery. You might have a character who has um, same-sex parents or something like that. And so, a classic example of how that, when that is done well, is um, the Mortal Instruments series. This is the first one. I have them. You can see them right here on my shelf, all up there. Those are all Mortal Instruments books, and then the prequels here, and then the sequels over here. Um, and so the Mortal Instruments series, it's a fantasy series. There's angels, there's demons, there's werewolves, there's all these different things, and vampires. It's your straight up classic YA fantasy series. Um, but it has sort of gotten national acclaim, I guess you will, because of how well it depicts a same-sex couple. So one of the main characters is a warlock named Magnus Bane. He's one of the coolest characters in the whole series. He's very, very old, 1,000 something years old, I forget. And he begins a relationship with one of the other, like the boy, like the main, the one of the angel characters, half angel characters in the book. So their relationship is so well done. They go through like flirtation and courtship. They go through, Alec, the guy he dates, hasn't really dated anybody before. So there's this, whereas Magnus has dated hundreds of people, because he's so old. And so there's sort of, they deal with that. They go through a long dating and courtship. They eventually get married. They adopt children. So like there's this whole, like over the course of the series, there's this whole sort of life cycle of this gay couple that plays out in almost to the side of the main story. Um, and it's so well done. One other thing I'll mention about the Mortal Instruments is that there's these two fat ones right here, and then there's one more missing from that. In I think that's the Dark Artifices, the next series that follows the Mortal Instruments. There's a plot, there's a theme in those books that I rarely see, and because it depicts a community that is rarely depicted in books for children or YA, and that is the polyamorous community. So you have this whole polyamorous lifestyle where people are in committed relationships with more than one person at a time. You have households that have three or four or five. You would have a polyamorous triad where you have three people who are all in a committed relationship or a marriage with each other. But then you have more casual polyamorous people who are um, in a boyfriend girlfriend or boyfriend boyfriend or whatever relationship, a committed long term relationship with multiple people, and not that's not cheating. They're all in on it, right? It's really a fascinating community that I'm not a part of, obviously, but like I would have mentioned that, but I think it's really an intriguing sort of it's an intriguing community in that there's not a lot of representation in my field. I can't think of any children's book that depicts a polyamorous household, and I haven't really encountered it at all in YA, except in the Dark Artifices. There is a polyamorous triad. There is a girl and two boy characters, and they end up. It's like a thing where she doesn't know who she loves them both. The two boys used to date each other, so it's this whole thing. So they find this equilibrium where they're just all together with each other, and it sounds like that seems like a Letter to Penthouse or something like that. So I think a lot of people in the poly community are used to their lifestyle being sort of fetishized in that way, but it's not even like that. It's genuine love that they all feel for each other, all three of them, and all three of them could not live without the other two, right? So it is. I don't know. I mean, I haven't read every book ever written, but I mean, it is the first sort of time I've encountered a polyamorous situation in books for young adults, right? Or definitely I haven't experienced it with children, but for in a YA, there might be others. Some of you guys watching this might know about others, but I've never encountered it except in that. So when I read that series, I was like, whoa, look at here, the poly community is being represented in this series. But the Mortal Instruments series has been praised many, many times for its diversity, cultural diversity, and um, sort of gender diversity, representations of LGBT themes. There's all kinds of sort of accolades that this series has gotten, and that's just another example of the diversity in the series. So that's the last thing I was going to mention is that that's not even what these books are about. There's like a whole main like fantasy plot, good versus evil kind of a thing, but the the world is peopled with um, a really diverse cast of different identities. So that's the last thing I'll mention. So I think I've taken up enough of your time. This has been like the length of a regular class, so that works. But I had so many interesting and beautiful books to share with you and things to say about them. And so I hope you enjoyed them. I hope if there's others that you know of that I haven't that I didn't mention or that I don't own. I always like to expand my list, my collection. So let me know. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a good rest of your week, and I will talk to you later.